In a land where faith burns heretics and crowns crumble to dust, one fallen nobleman will defy an empire to save a woman marked for death and discover a destiny written in stars and blood. The flames rose higher in the plaza of Valladolid, casting long shadows across cobblestones that had witnessed countless deaths. Another pyre, another witch. But this time, something was different. This time, Duke Lorenzo de Alvarez was watching. A man who should have been dead. A nobleman stripped of everything but his secrets. A fallen lion hiding among sheep. And as the woman was dragged toward her death, their eyes met across the crowd. Recognition flickering between two souls who had never met. She bore a mark he'd seen only in his visions. She carried a destiny that could restore his throne. In a world where the Inquisition's power is absolute and kings bow to priests, one desperate act of rebellion will ignite a fire that could either purify the kingdom or reduce it to ashes. Some say fate is written in the stars, others know it's carved in flesh. What happens when an exiled duke rescues a condemned witch from the flames? What ancient prophecy binds their fates together? And what terrible price must be paid when power long buried awakens once more? Join me on this epic journey of forbidden magic, dangerous romance, and the battle for a kingdom's soul. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of The Exiled Duke and the Witch's Mark. Like this video if you're ready for a tale of destiny and defiance unlike anything you've ever experienced. Share with friends who love historical fantasy with dark twists, and save this video to your favorites, because this is just the beginning of a story that will haunt your dreams and set your imagination ablaze. The first chapter awaits, and so does your destiny. Leave a comment below with your theories about the mysterious mark and what powers it might hold. The dream always ended the same way, with her burning. Lorenzo de Alvarez woke gasping, sweat-drenched, despite the cold that seeped through the cracked walls of his meager lodgings. Dawn had not yet broken over Valladolid, but sleep would not return. It never did after the vision. He sat up on his thin mattress, running calloused fingers through hair that had once been trimmed daily by servants. Now it hung past his shoulders, as unkempt as his beard, both necessary disguises for a man whose face had once graced royal portraits. 5 years. 5 years since the coup that destroyed House Alvarez. 5 years since he had fled the palace with nothing but the clothes on his back and the royal signet ring sewn into the hem of his cloak. 5 years living as Miguel, a humble scribe who barely earned enough to survive. And for 3 of those years he had dreamed of her burning. Lorenzo reached for the jug of water beside his bed, his hand trembling. The woman's face was always clearly visible in the dream. Olive skin, eyes the color of amber, a proud chin that refused to drop even as they led her to the stake. And always, the mark behind her left ear. A perfect 5-pointed star that seemed to glow from within. "Who are you?" he whispered to the darkness, as he had 100 times before. "What do you want from me?" The only answer was the distant toll of church bells, calling the faithful to morning prayer. Lorenzo ignored them. What God would allow his family to be slaughtered, his birthright stolen? What God would send him visions of a burning woman he could not save? He rose and dressed in the coarse clothes of his disguise, a far cry from the silks and velvets he had once worn without thought. From beneath a loose floorboard, he retrieved a small pouch containing his most precious possession, the Alvarez signet ring emblazoned with the lion rampant, the only proof of who he truly was. For a moment, he allowed himself to slip it onto his finger, feeling its familiar weight. Then, with practiced discipline, he returned it to its hiding place. Not today. Not yet. Outside, Valladolid was coming to life. Lorenzo merged with the flow of laborers, merchants, and beggars streaming through the narrow streets. He kept his head down, shoulders hunched, the posture of a man who wished to remain invisible. It had served him well these 5 years. His work as a scribe took him to a small shop near the central market, where he spent his days copying legal documents, letters for the illiterate, and occasionally forbidden texts for those who paid enough to ensure his discretion. It was mindless work for a man educated by the finest tutors in the realm, but it kept him alive and, more importantly, unnoticed. Until today. "Have you heard?" His employer, a stooped old man named Fernan, wheezed as Lorenzo entered the shop. "They've caught another witch. A woman from the northern provinces. They say she bears the mark of the devil himself. Lorenzo froze, his blood turning to ice. When is the trial? Trial? Fernand laughed bitterly. What trial? The Holy Office has already condemned her. The burning is today, at noon. The world seemed to tilt beneath Lorenzo's feet. It couldn't be. The woman from his dreams, just a nightmare, a phantom born of guilt and grief. She couldn't be real. Where are they holding her? The question escaped before he could stop himself. Fernand gave him a curious look. The cells beneath the Inquisitor's palace. But why would a humble scribe care about such things? Idle curiosity, Lorenzo muttered, taking his seat at the writing desk. Nothing more. But his mind was racing, calculating. The Inquisitor's palace, once a wing of the royal residence where he had played as a child. He knew its secrets, its hidden passages. If the woman was real, if she truly bore the mark, no, it was madness. Even if she existed, what could he do? One man against the might of the Inquisition. He had survived this long by remaining invisible, patient, gathering allies slowly for the day he would reclaim his throne. To risk everything for a stranger, a condemned witch. And yet, as the morning wore on, Lorenzo found himself unable to focus on his work. The quill trembled in his hand, blotting ink across expensive parchment. The woman's face, so vivid in his dreams, haunted him still in waking hours. At midday, a commotion from the plaza drew everyone into the streets. Lorenzo followed the crowd, his heart pounding against his ribs. The smell of pitch and wood filled the air. In the center of the plaza, a stake had been erected. The crowd parted as the procession approached. Inquisitors in their black robes, guards in polished armor, and between them, a small figure in a dirty white shift, her hands bound before her. Lorenzo's breath caught in his throat. It was her. Exactly as she appeared in his dreams. Dark hair matted with filth, face bruised but unbowed. Even from a distance, her amber eyes seemed to burn with an inner light. "Behold the witch!" cried the lead Inquisitor, a tall man with a face as sharp and merciless as a blade. "Catalina of Navarre, who bears the devil's mark and practices the dark arts. Today, we cleanse her soul with purifying flames." The crowd roared its approval, but Lorenzo barely heard them. His eyes were fixed on the woman, Catalina. As they dragged her toward the stake, her gaze swept across the crowd, unseeing, until suddenly, inexplicably, it locked with his. Recognition flashed between them, impossible but undeniable. "She knows me," Lorenzo thought, as stunned as if struck by lightning. "And I know her." What happened next seemed to occur outside his conscious will. Lorenzo found himself moving forward, pushing through the crowd. His hand slipped inside his tunic, where he kept the forgeries he had prepared months ago for a very different purpose. Documents bearing the seal of the Royal Chancery, papers that would pass cursory inspection, but never withstand scrutiny. "Halt!" he called out, his voice deeper, more commanding than it had been in years. The voice of Duke Lorenzo de Alvarez, not the scribe Miguel. "I bring orders from the Royal Chancery." The procession paused. The lead Inquisitor turned, his face darkening with annoyance at the interruption. "Who dares interfere with Holy Office business?" he demanded. Lorenzo straightened to his full height, shedding the stooped posture of the humble scribe. "Miguel de Velasco, Royal Courier," he announced, producing the forged documents with a flourish. "I bring orders regarding the prisoner." The Inquisitor's eyes narrowed. "What orders?" "The prisoner is to be transferred immediately to Toledo. The Archbishop himself wishes to interrogate her." Lorenzo stepped closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "There are complications regarding her lineage, matters that require delicate handling." He could feel Catalina's eyes on him, burning with confusion and desperate hope. "Don't react," he silently willed her. "Not yet." The Inquisitor snatched the documents, examining them with suspicion. Lorenzo's heart hammered in his chest. The forgeries were good. He had learned the craft well during his exile, but they would not withstand close scrutiny. "These seem in order," the Inquisitor said finally, though doubt lingered in his voice. But why was I not informed of this directly? Lorenzo allowed a look of surprise to cross his face. The messenger was sent 3 days ago, Your Eminence. Did he not arrive? Doubt flickered in the Inquisitor's eyes. No one wanted to admit to losing important messages, especially those supposedly from the Archbishop. Lorenzo pressed his advantage. I have been instructed to depart immediately with the prisoner. The Archbishop is most eager to begin his questioning. He gestured to the crowd. Surely it would be best to clear the plaza now. The people have been promised a spectacle. Their disappointment might turn unpleasant. The Inquisitor glanced at the restless crowd, then back at Lorenzo. A cold smile spread across his thin lips. Of course, he said silkily. We would not wish to disappoint the Archbishop. However, I insist on providing an escort for such a dangerous prisoner. Lorenzo's mind raced. An escort would doom them both the moment they left the city. Most generous, he replied smoothly, but the Archbishop was most insistent on secrecy. The fewer who know of this transfer, the better. He leaned closer. There are political considerations. The prisoner may have connections that reach into the highest circles. The Inquisitor's eyes gleamed with sudden interest. Nothing enticed the Holy Office more than the possibility of ensnaring powerful prey. I see, he murmured. Very well. Take the witch. But know this, courier. If she escapes, it is your life that will answer for it. She will not escape, Lorenzo assured him as guards untied Catalina from the stake and roughly pushed her toward him. I guarantee it. As Lorenzo took custody of Catalina, their eyes met once more. Up close, he could see the mark behind her left ear, exactly as in his dreams, a perfect star that seemed to glow faintly against her skin. Move, he muttered, loud enough for the guards to hear. Then in a whisper meant only for her, trust me if you want to live. He led her away from the plaza, acutely aware of the Inquisitor's eyes boring into his back. They were not safe yet, far from it. The Inquisitor's suspicions would soon overcome his political caution. Where are you taking me? Catalina's voice was hoarse, probably from screaming during interrogation. The thought made Lorenzo's blood boil. Away from here, he replied quietly. The documents are forged. We have perhaps an hour before they realize the deception. Her step faltered. Why? Why risk your life for a stranger? How could he explain the dreams, the visions that had haunted him for years? How could he tell her that her face had been burned into his mind long before they met? You're not a stranger, he said finally, guiding her toward a narrow alley that would lead them to the city's edge. And you bear a mark I've seen before. Her hand instinctively went to the spot behind her ear. The star, she whispered. You know what it means? No, Lorenzo admitted. But I intend to find out. Behind them, church bells began to toll, not the measured rings marking the hour, but the frantic, irregular peals that signaled alarm. The Inquisitor had discovered the deception. Run, Lorenzo commanded, taking Catalina's hand. Our lives depend on it now. As they fled through the twisting alleys of Valladolid, Lorenzo felt a strange sense of rightness amid the danger. For 5 years, he had hidden in shadows, waiting, planning a revenge that seemed ever more distant. But now, with the witch's hand in his and the Inquisition at their heels, he felt truly awake for the first time since his exile. Whatever mysterious force had connected them through his dreams, whatever destiny the star-shaped mark portended, one thing was certain. The game had changed. The exiled lion of House Alvarez was done hiding. The hunt had begun. The bells of alarm echoed through Valladolid as Lorenzo pulled Catalina deeper into the maze of narrow alleys. Her wrists were raw from the ropes, her legs unsteady after days in the Inquisition's cells. Still, she kept pace, necessity driving her forward. They darted down a squalid passage between leaning buildings, the stench of waste and despair thick in the air. Lorenzo moved with surprising confidence for a royal courier, taking turns without hesitation, avoiding the wider streets where guards would surely be gathering. Catalina studied his profile as they ran. There was something in his bearing that spoke of nobility despite his common clothes, the way he held himself, the assured tone of his commands. This was no simple courier. A shout rang out behind them. Catalina glanced back to see torches at the alley's entrance, the distinctive black robes of an inquisitor visible in the flickering light. Lorenzo cursed under his breath. Without warning, he pulled her sharply sideways toward what appeared to be a solid wall. Only as they approached did Catalina see the narrow gap between buildings, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. They pressed into the tight space, stones scraping against their backs and chests. Catalina bit her lip to keep from crying out, as the rough wall abraded her already bruised skin. Lorenzo led the way, inching sideways until the passage suddenly opened into a small, forgotten courtyard. An ancient well stood at its center, surrounded by crumbling stone. Lorenzo moved directly to it, glancing over the edge. "We go down," he said simply. Catalina balked, finally finding her voice. "Down there? Into the well? It's dry, and there are handholds cut into the side. It leads to tunnels beneath the city." When she hesitated, he added more urgently, "Unless you prefer the Inquisitor's hospitality." The memory of the cell, the questions, the instruments laid out with loving care by her tormentors decided her. Catalina approached the well. Lorenzo went first, disappearing into the darkness with practiced ease. Catalina followed more cautiously, feeling for each foothold before trusting her weight to it. The stone was slick with moss, and her weakened body protested every movement. 20 feet down, her foot slipped. A strong hand caught her arm before she could fall. Lorenzo steadied her, guiding her foot to a secure hold. "Almost there," he murmured, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. At the bottom, Lorenzo produced a small tinderbox from inside his tunic. With deft movements, he struck flame and lit a stub of candle, revealing a low tunnel mouth set into the well's wall. "This way," he said, ducking into the passage. The tunnel was ancient, predating even the oldest parts of Valladolid above. It smelled of earth and time, the stone walls occasionally giving way to sections shored up with timber that groaned under the weight of the city above. Their single candle cast monstrous shadows as they hurried forward, bent at the waist to avoid the low ceiling. Only when the sounds of pursuit had faded completely did Lorenzo slow their pace. Catalina sagged against the wall, exhaustion overwhelming her. "I need to rest," she gasped. Lorenzo hesitated, clearly wanting to put more distance between them and their pursuers. But after studying her face in the candlelight, he nodded. Briefly, he conceded, "We're not safe yet." Catalina slid down the wall until she sat on the packed earth floor. Now that the immediate danger had passed, questions crowded her mind. "Who are you really?" she asked. "No royal courier knows the secret passages of Valladolid so well." Lorenzo regarded her silently for a long moment, as if weighing how much to reveal. "My name is Miguel," he said finally. "I make my living as a scribe in the city. The rest does not matter." "It matters to me," Catalina countered. "You risked your life to save mine." "Why?" Again that measuring look. "I saw your mark," he said, gesturing toward her left ear. "The star, I've seen it before." Unconsciously, Catalina's hand rose to cover the mark she had spent a lifetime hiding. The mark that had finally betrayed her to a servant who sold the information to the Inquisition for a handful of silver. "It's a birthmark, nothing more," she said defensively. Lorenzo's laugh was short and bitter. "We both know that's not true. The Inquisition doesn't burn women for ordinary birthmarks." "They burn women for far less," Catalina replied darkly. "For being too beautiful, too ugly, too outspoken, too silent. For having knowledge of herbs, for being barren, for losing too many babes. For owning a cat or speaking to birds or simply being in the wrong place when someone powerful needed a scapegoat." Her voice had risen, and Lorenzo motioned for her to lower it. "Your mark is different," he insisted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've dreamed of it. Of you." Catalina stiffened. "What do you mean?" "For 3 years I've had the same dream. A woman with amber eyes and a star behind her left ear, bound to a stake and surrounded by flames." His gaze was intense in the candlelight. "The woman was you, Catalina." A chill ran through her despite the tunnel's closeness. How could this stranger have dreamed of her? And more disturbingly, How had he known her fate before she did? "I don't believe in prophetic dreams," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Nor did I, until today." Lorenzo leaned closer, studying her face. "When our eyes met in the plaza, you recognized me too. Admit it." Catalina wanted to deny it, but the truth was undeniable. When she had looked into his eyes across the crowded plaza, something had resonated within her. A feeling of recognition, of connection, though she was certain they had never met. "Perhaps," she admitted reluctantly, "but that proves nothing." "It proves we are connected, though I don't yet understand how or why." Lorenzo sat back, his expression troubled. "The mark you bear is important. It means something." "It means I was nearly burned alive," Catalina said bitterly. "Nothing more." Lorenzo shook his head. "We need to keep moving. There's someone who might have answers if we can reach him." He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed with exhaustion. They continued through the tunnels, the path twisting and branching. Lorenzo navigated with certainty, taking turns without hesitation. "How do you know these passages so well?" Catalina asked again. "I explored them as a child," he replied after a brief pause. They were a refuge of sorts. Before she could question him further, the tunnel widened into a larger chamber. Ancient columns supported the ceiling, carved with symbols Catalina didn't recognize. The space had been made habitable with rough pallets, a stone fire pit, and shelves holding provisions. A figure rose from beside the small smokeless fire that provided the chamber's only light. An old man, his face a map of wrinkles, his white beard reaching nearly to his waist. His eyes, however, were startlingly clear and sharp. "Miguel," the old man greeted Lorenzo, though his gaze was fixed on Catalina. "So you've brought her after all?" Catalina tensed. "You expected me?" "For many years," the old man replied enigmatically. He gestured for them to approach the fire. "Come, sit. You are safe here, at least for now." Lorenzo guided Catalina forward. As they neared the fire, the old man's eyes widened. "The mark," he whispered. "Let me see it clearly." Reluctantly, Catalina turned her head, pulling back her matted hair to reveal the star-shaped birthmark behind her left ear. The old man made a sound that might have been awe or fear. Gently, his weathered fingers hovered above the mark without touching it. "It glows," he murmured. "Faintly, but it glows from within." "That's impossible," Catalina protested, though she knew it was true. In moments of strong emotion or danger, she had sometimes caught a reflection of her mark in polished surfaces, glowing with an inner light that defied explanation. The old man turned to Lorenzo. "And you've seen it in your dreams? The woman? The mark?" Lorenzo nodded. "For 3 years now. Always the same dream." The old man sank back, his expression grave. "Then it has begun." "What has begun?" Catalina demanded. "Who are you? What do you know about my mark?" "I am Matteo," the old man said, "once court astronomer to King Ferdinando before the coup, now keeper of old knowledge that the Holy Office would gladly burn alongside me." He gestured around the chamber. "This has been my home these past 5 years, since the Night of Blood." Catalina glanced at Lorenzo, noting how his jaw tightened at the mention of the coup. "And what do you know of my mark?" she pressed. Matteo's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "It is the Star of Ascension, a sign that appears perhaps once in 10 generations. Those who bear it are catalysts for great change." He turned to Lorenzo. "That you dream of her is no coincidence, Miguel. Or should I call you by your true name?" Lorenzo tensed visibly. "Miguel will suffice." Catalina looked between them, suddenly understanding. "You're not really a scribe, are you?" "His identity is his own secret to keep or share," Matteo interjected. "What matters is that your paths have crossed as the prophecy foretold." "What prophecy?" Catalina asked warily. Matteo's voice took on a rhythmic quality, as if reciting from memory. "When the star rises in flesh and the lion falls from grace, look to the witch who bears the light. She is the beacon for the fallen lion." "La bruja es el faro del león caído," Lorenzo translated softly. The words resonated in the chamber, seeming to stir the very air. Catalina felt the mark behind her ear grow warm. "I am no witch," she said firmly, "and I see no fallen lion here." A tense silence followed her words. Matteo and Lorenzo exchanged a look that Catalina couldn't interpret. "The lion will reveal himself when the time is right," Matteo said finally. "For now, know only that your meeting was fated, written in the stars centuries ago." "I don't believe in fate," Catalina replied, "only in choices and their consequences." Matteo smiled, a surprisingly gentle expression on his weathered face. "And yet fate believed in you, child. Why else would it mark you so distinctly? Why else would it send dreams to guide him to you?" Before Catalina could respond, the sound of distant footsteps echoed through the tunnels. Lorenzo was on his feet instantly, hand going to a knife concealed in his belt. "The Inquisition," Catalina whispered, fear gripping her heart once more. "No," Matteo said, rising more slowly. "Others who dwell in these shadows. Not all are friends." Lorenzo moved to Catalina's side. "We should go. Is the western passage still clear?" Matteo nodded. "It will take you beyond the city walls, to the forest." He turned to Catalina. "You must guard your mark carefully. Cover it always. There are others who seek it, who have searched for generations." "Who?" Catalina asked. "Why?" "Some believe the bearer of the Star of Ascension can restore what was broken," Matteo replied cryptically. "Others fear that very restoration and would destroy the star before it fulfills its purpose." The footsteps grew louder. Lorenzo pulled urgently at Catalina's arm. "We must go now," he insisted. From a shelf, he took a cloak and thrust it at her. "Cover yourself, especially the mark." As Catalina wrapped the cloak around her shoulders, Matteo caught her hand. "Trust him," the old man said quietly. "Whatever secrets he keeps, his dreams have bound him to your fate. And remember, the star is both target and shield." With those cryptic words ringing in her ears, Catalina followed Lorenzo into another tunnel, leaving Matteo standing by his fire. The passageway was narrower than the ones they had traversed earlier, forcing them to move in single file. "He knows who you really are," Catalina said to Lorenzo's back. Lorenzo didn't slow or turn. "Matteo knows many things. Not all of them matter now." "It matters to me," Catalina insisted. "I'm trusting you with my life. Shouldn't I know who I'm trusting?" Lorenzo stopped so abruptly that Catalina nearly collided with him. He turned, his face half shadowed by the guttering candle. "You want truth? Here it is. I am a man with nothing left to lose. My family is dead, my home taken, my title meaningless. The only thing that has kept me alive these past 5 years is the thought of vengeance." His voice dropped lower. And then the dreams began. You burning, the star mark glowing, and somehow I knew that saving you was more important than revenge. "Why?" Catalina asked. "Why would I matter to you?" "I don't know," Lorenzo admitted, the anger draining from his voice. "But I intend to find out. For now, that will have to be enough." He turned away, continuing down the tunnel. Catalina followed, uncertain whether to be frightened or reassured by his words. This man, whoever he truly was, had risked everything to save her. Yet he kept his identity hidden, even as he pursued answers about hers. The tunnel began to slope upward. The air grew fresher, carrying hints of pine and earth instead of the stale dampness of the underground passages. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a dead end, until Lorenzo pushed against a section of wall that gave way, revealing starlight beyond. They emerged into a small clearing in a dense forest, the walls of Valladolid visible in the distance. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. Catalina tilted her head back, breathing deeply of air untainted by smoke or fear. "Where do we go now?" she asked. Lorenzo was scanning the forest, alert for any sign of pursuit. "North," he said finally, "to people who might shelter us while we learn more about your mark and what it means." "And if I don't want to go?" Catalina asked, testing him. Lorenzo's gaze returned to her, measuring. "Then you're free to choose your own path. I saved you from burning. I won't force you to follow me." Catalina considered her options. She could try to make her way alone, perhaps to the coast, find a ship bound for the new world where the Inquisition's reach was less certain. But she would be a woman alone, hunted, with no resources, or she could follow this mysterious man who claimed to have dreamed of her for years, who had risked his life to save hers, who seemed connected to her fate through the mark she had always hidden. "I'll go with you," she decided, "for now. But know this, I won't be used as a pawn in whatever game you're playing." "Not a pawn," Lorenzo said quietly. "If Matteo is right, you may be the most powerful piece on the board." As they set off through the forest, Catalina felt the mark behind her ear pulse warmly, like a second heartbeat. Whatever its purpose, whatever destiny it proclaimed, one thing was certain: her life would never be the same. And what of the man who walked beside her? Was he truly the fallen lion of the prophecy? Or was he using her for his own ends, drawn by the power her mark supposedly contained? The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and knowing, as the witch and the man who might be a lion disappeared into the shadows of the forest, leaving Valladolid and its burning stakes behind. What mysterious power does the Star of Ascension truly hold? And how will it change the fate of a kingdom teetering on the edge of fire and darkness? 3 days had passed since their escape from Valladolid. 3 days of furtive travel through dense forest, avoiding main roads and villages, surviving on meager provisions Lorenzo had managed to secure from hidden caches along their route. They now approached a cluster of ramshackle dwellings nestled in a protected valley, nearly invisible among the trees until one was almost upon them. Thin wisps of smoke rose from crude chimneys, the only sign of human habitation. Catalina eyed the settlement warily. Her strength had returned somewhat during their journey, but suspicion remained her constant companion. Lorenzo had been careful, considerate even, yet he still refused to reveal his true identity. The Star of Ascension behind her ear tingled occasionally, as if responding to some unseen force. Since Matteo had named it, the mark seemed more alive, more present than it had been throughout her 20 years of life. As they descended toward the settlement, figures emerged from the shadows between buildings. Men and women with hard eyes and harder faces, carrying an assortment of weapons. Outcasts and refugees, each bearing visible or invisible scars inflicted by the same authorities that had condemned Catalina. A tall woman with a jagged scar bisecting her face stepped forward, blocking their path. "Who comes to the sanctuary?" she demanded, hand resting on the hilt of a worn sword. Lorenzo raised his hands slowly. "Friends of Matteo, we seek refuge." The woman studied them intently, her gaze lingering on Catalina. "Matteo sends many our way, not all are welcome." "We fled the Inquisition in Valladolid," Lorenzo said quietly. "She was bound for the stake." Murmurs rippled through the gathered watchers. The scarred woman's expression softened marginally. "What is your name, girl?" she asked. "Catalina of Navarre," Catalina answered, lifting her chin. "And your companion?" Before Lorenzo could speak, Catalina interjected, "He calls himself Miguel, though I suspect that is not his true name." The scarred woman's eyes narrowed. "Few among us use the names we were born with. Names are luxuries for those who live in the light." She gestured toward the settlement. "I am Soledad. The sanctuary offers shelter to those with nowhere else to go, provided they contribute to our survival and bring no danger to our door." "We cannot promise the latter," Lorenzo admitted. "The Holy Office will be searching for us beyond Valladolid by now." Soledad shrugged. "The Holy Office searches for all of us. One more witch makes little difference." "I'm not a witch," Catalina insisted. Soledad's scarred face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Neither am I. Neither are most who burn." She turned and began walking toward the settlement. "Come. You will be given food and a place to rest. Tomorrow, we will discuss your place among us." The gathered watchers parted, allowing them passage. As they walked through the settlement, Catalina observed people engaged in various tasks, tending small gardens, repairing weapons, teaching children to read from tattered books, a community of outcasts, creating a semblance of normalcy in the shadow of persecution. They were led to a small hut at the edge of the settlement. Inside was sparse but clean, 2 pallets on the dirt floor, a crude table with a pitcher of water, a single stool. "Rest," Soledad said. "Food will be brought shortly. Tomorrow at dawn, you will meet with the council." With that, she left them alone. Catalina sank onto one of the pallets, exhaustion overtaking her once more. Lorenzo remained standing, peering through the single small window that overlooked the settlement. "What is this place?" Catalina asked. "A refuge for those the kingdom has cast out," Lorenzo replied without turning. "Heretics, criminals, political refugees, people with nowhere else to go. People like us." For now, Lorenzo finally turned to face her. In the dim light of the hut, his features seemed different somehow, less guarded. For a moment, Catalina caught a glimpse of the man behind the disguise, a nobility that no common clothing could fully conceal. "You were someone important once, weren't you?" she asked softly. A flash of something, pain perhaps or anger, crossed his face. "We all were someone else before. It doesn't matter now. It matters if it affects my survival," Catalina countered. "These people know you, or at least know of you. You're more than a simple scribe." Lorenzo sighed, moving to sit on the stool. "I was raised in Valladolid. I know its secrets, its tunnels, its people. That knowledge has allowed me to help others escape when necessary." "Like me?" "Yes. Like you." His gaze was steady, revealing nothing more. Catalina decided to change tactics. "Tell me about your dreams then. You said you've dreamed of me for 3 years. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, as if he hadn't expected her to remember or bring it up. "Always the same dream. You, bound to a stake in the plaza, the flames rising, and always the mark behind your ear glowing like a star in the night sky." "And you never saw how it ended? Whether I burned or escaped?" Lorenzo shook his head. "I always woke at the same moment, just as the flames reached your face." He paused. "Your eyes never left mine, even then." A shiver ran through Catalina. "Why would you dream of a stranger's death?" "I don't know," Lorenzo admitted. "But when I saw you in the plaza exactly as in my dream," he trailed off, searching for words. "It felt like a command, like I had been preparing for that moment without knowing it." Before Catalina could respond, the door opened. A young girl entered carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and 2 wooden cups of thin soup. She set it on the table without a word, cast a curious glance at Catalina, and departed. They ate in silence, the first proper meal they'd had since their escape. When they finished, night had fallen completely. Lorenzo took the tray outside, leaving Catalina alone with her thoughts. She touched the mark behind her ear, trying to reconcile the ordinariness of her life before with what Matteo had told her. The star of ascension, a catalyst for great change, connected somehow to this mysterious man who had saved her life. Lorenzo returned, closing the door behind him. "The settlement is well guarded," he said. "We should be safe here for a few days at least." "And then?" Catalina asked. "Then we find answers." Lorenzo moved to his pallet. "We should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Catalina lay down, pulling a thin blanket over herself. Despite her exhaustion, sleep proved elusive. Too many questions crowded her mind. Too many dangers lurked beyond their temporary sanctuary. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were fraught with burning stakes and star-shaped flames. She woke to hushed voices outside the hut. Dawn had barely broken, pale light filtering through the small window. Lorenzo was already awake, listening intently to the conversation outside. "What is it?" Catalina whispered. "Trouble," Lorenzo replied grimly. "Inquisition patrols have been spotted near the valley." Fear, her constant companion these past days, returned with renewed force. "How did they find us so quickly?" "They may not have. The Holy Office has increased patrols throughout the region. It might be coincidence." But his tone suggested he didn't believe it. The door opened and Soledad entered, her scarred face grim. "The council is gathering now. Your presence is required immediately." They followed her through the awakening settlement to a larger structure at its center. Inside, a circle of men and women waited, their expressions ranging from concern to outright hostility. "The refugees from Valladolid," Soledad announced, gesturing for Lorenzo and Catalina to stand in the center of the circle. An elderly man with a patch over one eye spoke first. "Inquisition forces approach from the north, 30 men at least with tracking dogs. This is no ordinary patrol." "They're hunting you specifically," a younger woman added, glaring at Catalina. "You've brought death to our door." "We had no intention of endangering your community," Lorenzo said, his voice calm but authoritative. "We'll leave immediately." "Too late," Soledad replied. "The patrol is between us and the northern passes. They would catch you before nightfall." A tense silence fell over the gathering. Catalina felt the weight of accusatory stares, the fear and anger directed at her. These people had created a fragile sanctuary, and her presence threatened to destroy it. "There may be another way," a soft voice offered from the back of the circle. A woman stepped forward, her simple habit identifying her as a nun. "The convent of Santa Lucia lies to the west, a day's journey through the forest. The Mother Superior is sympathetic to our cause and has sheltered fugitives before." Catalina felt a surge of hope. A convent would be the last place the Inquisition would look for an accused witch. "Sister Beatriz speaks truly," Soledad confirmed. "The convent has helped us in the past." She turned to Lorenzo. "You could take her there while we lead the patrol astray." The one-eyed man nodded slowly. "We can leave false trails to the south, draw them away from both you and the convent." "It's decided then," Soledad declared. "You will leave within the hour. Sister Beatriz will provide directions to the convent." As the council dispersed to prepare their deception, Sister Beatriz approached Catalina. Her face was kind, her eyes gentle. "The Mother Superior will protect you," she assured Catalina. "Many women find sanctuary within those walls." "Thank you," Catalina said, genuinely grateful. Sister Beatriz smiled, then turned to Lorenzo. "I must speak with you privately before you depart. There are details about the approach to the convent that you should know." Lorenzo nodded. "Of course." They followed Sister Beatriz outside, where she led them a short distance from the main building. When they were out of earshot of others, she turned to Lorenzo. "There is something I must tell you," she said, her voice dropping. "Something not for the ears of the council." Catalina tensed, sensing a shift in the air between them. "The Mother Superior has an arrangement," Sister Beatriz continued, "for women of special interest to certain parties." "What kind of arrangement?" Lorenzo asked, his voice suddenly cold. Sister Beatriz glanced at Catalina, then back to Lorenzo. "There are those who pay handsomely for women with unusual traits or abilities, women who might otherwise burn." Catalina felt the blood drain from her face. "You're speaking of selling women," she said numbly. Sister Beatriz didn't deny it. "It's not as harsh as it sounds. They are treated well, employed for their unique qualities. It's a better fate than the stake." "And what would make Catalina of special interest?" Lorenzo asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. "Word has spread of a woman bearing the Star of Ascension," Sister Beatriz replied, confirming Catalina's worst fears. "Such a woman would command a high price from certain collectors of the unusual." Lorenzo's expression darkened. "And who told you of her mark?" Sister Beatriz smiled thinly. "Information travels quickly in our world. The Mother Superior has already been contacted. She expects delivery within 2 days." "Delivery?" Catalina echoed, disgust and fear warring within her. She turned to Lorenzo, expecting to see shock or outrage. Instead, his face was carefully blank. "How much?" he asked Sister Beatriz. "Miguel," Catalina gasped. 10,000 gold reales, Sister Beatriz replied without hesitation. "Half on delivery, half when the buyer confirms the authenticity of the mark." Lorenzo nodded slowly, enough to buy passage far from Spain, perhaps to the New World. Catalina couldn't believe what she was hearing. The man who had risked his life to save her from burning was now calmly discussing selling her to some unknown collector. "You would betray me so easily," she whispered. Lorenzo didn't look at her. "The arrangement sounds reasonable. We will depart for the convent as planned." Sister Beatriz smiled, clearly pleased. "The council will provide you with supplies for the journey. I will inform the Mother Superior to expect you." As Sister Beatriz walked away, Catalina stood frozen, the magnitude of the betrayal washing over her. All the suspicions she had fought to suppress came rushing back. Lorenzo had never truly cared about saving her life. She had simply been a valuable commodity to him, a means to wealth or power through her mysterious mark. "Catalina," Lorenzo began, finally meeting her gaze. "Don't speak to me," she hissed. "I should have known better than to trust a man who hides behind lies and half-truths. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Catalina cut him off. My life has value only as a trading piece for you. Before he could respond, Soledad approached, carrying bundles of supplies. You should depart immediately, she said, handing the bundles to Lorenzo. Our scouts report the patrol is changing direction, heading east along the river. Lorenzo accepted the supplies with a nod. We'll leave now, thank you for your help. Soledad turned to Catalina. May the old gods watch over you, girl. Whatever the Inquisition claims, your kind has always had a place in this world. Catalina could only nod numbly. The irony of Soledad's blessing almost too much to bear. She was escaping one form of persecution, only to be handed over to another kind of captivity. As they left the settlement, following a narrow trail that would lead them west toward the convent, Catalina's mind raced. She had to escape, not just from the Inquisition now, but from Lorenzo as well. The forest was dense around them. If she could slip away, lose herself among the trees. I know what you're thinking, Lorenzo said quietly beside her. Don't. Why not? Catalina challenged. So you can collect your payment in full? Lorenzo stopped abruptly, turning to face her. Catalina, listen. But whatever he intended to say was lost, as sounds of commotion erupted from the settlement behind them. Shouts, the clash of metal, the distinctive crack of arquebus fire. The patrol, Catalina breathed. They found the settlement. Lorenzo grabbed her arm, pulling her deeper into the forest. Run, he commanded, and whatever happens, stay close to me. Why should I trust you now? Catalina demanded, even as she allowed him to lead her away from the sounds of battle. Because despite what you believe, I have no intention of delivering you to the convent or anyone else, Lorenzo replied grimly. Sister Beatrice is a spy for the Inquisition. The convent is a trap. Catalina faltered, confusion overwhelming her fear for a moment. But you agreed to take me there. I needed her to believe we were coming. Lorenzo's pace never slackened as they fled through the forest. Now the Inquisition will waste time watching the convent while we go elsewhere. Hope warred with suspicion in Catalina's heart. How do I know this isn't another lie? Lorenzo paused just long enough to meet her eyes. You don't, but ask yourself this. If I truly meant to sell you, why would I have risked my life to save you from the Inquisition in the first place? It was a question Catalina had no answer for. Behind them, the sounds of battle grew fainter as they pushed deeper into the unknown wilderness. Was Lorenzo truly her protector, or was this just another layer of deception? And if the convent was indeed a trap, where could they possibly go now that both the Inquisition and fake allies were hunting them? Will Catalina ever discover the truth behind Lorenzo's mysterious identity? Or is she destined to remain a pawn in a game whose rules she doesn't understand? The sun had barely broken the horizon when Catalina felt the sharp jab of a staff in her ribs. Cold stone pressed against her cheek. She had fallen asleep in the damp shadows of a gnarled root hidden beneath a thicket. But now the forest was gone. The humid air replaced with the heavy stench of mold and candle wax. Chains clinked around her wrists as she was dragged across uneven ground. Her head spun. She remembered running, Lorenzo shouting behind her. And then nothing. A flash of pain, a scream swallowed by shadows. Betrayal had been a constant companion, but this felt like the final stroke. On your feet, witch. The voice belonged to a man with silver-threaded robes and a face carved from years of scorn. Two guards flanked him, both gripping her arms. She was no longer in the forest. Stone walls enclosed her now, high and arched. Iron sconces flickered against damp rock. A cell? No, a crypt perhaps, repurposed as a dungeon beneath the convent of Santa Lucia. They led her through narrow corridors that wound like a serpent. Murmured prayers echoed off the walls. As they passed iron-barred cells, gaunt faces emerged from the darkness, others imprisoned, accused, broken, a chorus of forgotten souls. She was thrown into a circular chamber. The room smelled of burnt flesh and incense. A chair sat in the center. Not a chair, a device. Iron cuffs, dried blood, tools on the wall. A tall figure stood behind the chair, adjusting straps. His back was to her, his posture disturbingly calm. She bears the mark, he asked without turning. Yes, Inquisitor, behind the left ear. The man turned. Catalina gasped. It was not Torquemada but his closest executioner, Father Velasco. The stories said he had burned over 100 women. They said he sang psalms while the flames rose. He studied her as one might examine an artifact. "Do you know why you are here?" Catalina remained silent. Velasco's eyes narrowed. "You were warned once, at Valladolid, yet you chose to flee. That confirms your guilt." "I am no witch," she said, voice dry as dust. He gestured to the guards. "Strip her." The command echoed like thunder. She struggled, kicking, biting, but it was no use. Her dress was torn from her, and cold air seared her skin. The guards held her down while Velasco approached, his fingers calloused and slow as they brushed the mark behind her ear. He stared at it with something close to reverence. "The Star of Ascension," he whispered. "As it was written." Catalina jerked away. "What do you mean?" But Velasco only smiled. "We have waited generations for this. And now, you appear, plucked from fire by a ghost of a prince." He knew about Lorenzo. Velasco nodded as if hearing her thoughts. "Yes, the exiled duke. His interference was foretold too, but his defiance will not alter the outcome." He raised a hand. The guards forced her into the chair, strapping her wrists, ankles, chest. "Confess," Velasco said. "Spare yourself agony. Tell us who you serve. What coven? What demon gifted you this mark?" Catalina spat at his feet. "I serve no demon." The strike came fast, a backhand that split her lip. "So be it." The pain that followed was not immediate. The tools were ancient, precise, designed not to break the body but the soul. Heat, pulleys, questions asked not to gain truth but submission. Hours blurred. Screams, both hers and others, mingled in the stone. Her mind retreated, fleeing to moments of calm. Her mother's voice, the forest wind, the brief nights beside Lorenzo when he hadn't seemed like a liar. Lorenzo. Where was he? Why had he let this happen? She faded, and then, light. A voice rose above the chant of torches and prayers. "By the right of blood and flame, I claim interruption." Gasps followed. Footsteps halted. Even Velasco froze. Catalina opened her swollen eyes. At the entrance to the chamber stood a man cloaked in travel-worn crimson. His hood fell back to reveal sharp eyes and a scar that hadn't been there before. "Lorenzo," she whispered. Velasco sneered. "You are no one here, exile. You have no titles, no power." Lorenzo stepped forward. In his hand, he held something glinting gold. "I hold the seal of Leon," he declared. "And with it, the right to invoke the ley de reclamación." Murmurs surged like wildfire. "You dare speak that name?" Velasco hissed. "The ancient laws allow a noble of royal blood to demand the trial of a subject within his jurisdiction," Lorenzo said, his voice rising. "And this woman, Catalina of Navarre, was taken from the lands under my claim." "There is no Leon," Velasco roared. "The throne is dust, your bloodline is exiled, extinct." "Then kill me," Lorenzo challenged. "But know this, witnesses stand beyond these walls, riders ready to spread word of this heresy. Deny the law, and you deny the very crown you claim to protect." Silence. Then reluctantly, Velasco stepped back. "Bring her. We will take this to the hall." Catalina was unbound, her legs too weak to stand. Lorenzo rushed forward and caught her. For a moment she wanted to strike him, but his eyes, there was no lie in them now, only fury and fear. He carried her from the chamber. They entered a vast hall lit by stained glass windows, depicting saints and martyrs. Priests, scribes, and masked judges filled the pews. This was no longer a torture chamber. It was a stage. Velasco took his place beside the crimson-robed Grand Inquisitor. Catalina was placed on a wooden platform. Lorenzo stood beside her, holding the golden seal aloft. "I invoke the trial by witness and flame," he declared. "Let her speak before judgment is cast." The Grand Inquisitor's voice rang clear. "Let her speak." Catalina, bruised and bloodied, raised her head. "I have been called many names," she began. "Heretic, witch, demon." She paused. "But I am only Catalina. I was born to a seamstress, not to darkness. The mark I bear was not chosen. It came with my birth." I do not understand it, but I do not fear it. Lorenzo stepped forward. I have seen that mark in visions since I was a boy. In flames, in dreams, it led me to her, not as a destroyer, as a light. Velasco slammed his fist. This is heresy. No, Catalina said, turning to the assembly. The real heresy is burning children, chasing ghosts while the kingdom starves. The mark is not a curse, it is a sign. Of what? The Grand Inquisitor demanded. Catalina met his gaze. A future no longer ruled by fear. The hall erupted. Some shouted, others wept. A few stood in stunned silence. Velasco drew a dagger. Enough! He lunged, but Lorenzo was faster. Steel flashed. The dagger clattered to the floor. Lorenzo's sword was at Velasco's throat. No more fires, Lorenzo said. No more lies. A moment later, a horn echoed from outside. Lorenzo smiled. My men have arrived. The old banners rise again. The doors burst open. Armed riders stormed the hall, veterans of the old guard, wearing crests long thought extinct. Behind them, citizens pressed in, many bearing torches not to burn, but to illuminate. The Inquisition's grip shattered under the weight of legacy reborn. Velasco was seized. The Grand Inquisitor vanished in the chaos. Catalina collapsed, her body too battered to stand. Lorenzo caught her once more. You came back, she whispered. I never left you. He held her close as voices rose, some in prayer, others in rebellion. The mark behind her ear burned, not with pain, but with promise. Outside, the banners of Leon rose for the first time in 2 decades. But as freedom rang through the halls, Catalina's heart whispered one question. What if the mark was not only a gift, but a curse waiting to awaken? The plaza of Valladolid had changed since the day Catalina nearly burned. It no longer buzzed with commerce and laughter. It groaned with tension, thick and fevered, like the air before a storm. Soldiers in red and gold lined the square, forming a wall of spears and suspicion. The pyres had returned, their wood stacked high and dry. At the center stood a solitary platform, meant to host confessions and executions. Catalina stood beside Lorenzo, cloaked and silent beneath the midday sun. Her wounds had mostly healed, though the shadows under her eyes had not. The weight of what was about to happen pressed down like stone. Lorenzo had summoned the city. He had not asked for permission. He had sent word to every corner of Valladolid. There would be a declaration at noon, and those who had questions about the fires, the trials, the vanishing of the innocent would receive answers. No one had expected him to actually appear, not after years of exile and whispers. Yet here he was, walking toward the platform with Catalina at his side and a storm behind his eyes. The crowd parted reluctantly. Merchants, beggars, nobles, and peasants alike craned their necks. Some recognized him, others sensed only danger. The name of Lorenzo de Alvarez had become myth, a ghost that walked between rebellion and royalty. Now that ghost wore a crimson coat and carried a blade on his hip. A hush fell as they ascended the platform. Lorenzo raised his hand. People stilled. Soldiers watched. Torquemada himself sat in a chair of blackened wood at the far edge of the plaza, flanked by inquisitors and flanked by the banner of the Holy Office. His gaze was ice, unmoving. Catalina felt its burn even from across the square. I come not as a rebel, Lorenzo began, his voice amplified by the stillness. I come as blood of the House of Leon. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Shock, doubt, memory. You lie, someone shouted. Lorenzo said nothing. Instead, he reached into his coat and drew out a ring. It was gold, ancient, forged with the sigil of a lion rising from flames. As the sunlight touched it, the sigil seemed to burn in the open air. He held it high. This is the seal of Leon, passed through blood and fire, lost when the throne was betrayed, hidden when I was cast out. He slipped the ring onto his finger. And now, by right of inheritance, I invoke the ley de reclamation. Gasps turned to voices. The law was old, older than the Holy Office. A royal decree that allowed a blood heir to reclaim lands, protect subjects and challenge unjust judgments within their ancestral domain. Torquemada stood, "You play with shadows, boy," he said. "The throne has no place for ghosts." Lorenzo did not flinch. "And the pyre has no place for the innocent," he replied. He turned to Catalina, took her hand gently, and led her forward. The crowd drew closer. Soldiers tensed. "This woman," Lorenzo said, "was condemned without trial, hunted without proof, tortured for a mark she did not choose." He brushed her hair back, revealing the star of ascension behind her ear. Gasps turned to shouts. "That mark," a woman whispered near the front. "I saw it in the prophecy mural. The burning star." "It's her," said another. "The one the old seer spoke of before he vanished. The Witch of Light." "No," Lorenzo said firmly. "Not a witch. A torchbearer. A survivor. The prophecy speaks not of destruction, but rebirth." He raised his voice, sweeping the square. "The star of ascension marks the one who will end the fire, the one who will stand between a dying crown and a kingdom reborn." Torquemada laughed. It was a cold, rattling sound. "Prophecies are for the mad. You stand here spouting fables while heresy spreads like rot." Lorenzo turned to him. The sun framed his profile. He looked every inch the prince he was born to be. "I offer truth. You offer ashes. Tell me, Inquisitor, how many children have you burned to chase your fears? How many widows have you made in the name of purity?" "You accuse me?" Torquemada's voice boomed. "You who fled justice? Who consorted with witches and criminals?" "I accuse no one," Lorenzo said. "I reveal, the people will decide." He turned to the crowd. "You watched them burn. You heard their screams. Did you feel safer afterward? Or did you begin to wonder if your turn might come next?" Silence. Then a voice broke it. "My sister died for speaking Latin at her wedding," a man said. "They said it was sorcery. My neighbor vanished last winter, said she knew herbs too well. The baker's boy was taken for dreaming too much." Torquemada raised a hand. Soldiers moved forward. "Enough." Lorenzo stepped in front of Catalina. "You'll silence them as you've silenced hundreds? This ends now," Torquemada growled. "Yes," Lorenzo replied, and with that he dropped a cloth onto the platform. Inside was the burned sigil of the Holy Office, the one he had torn from Velasco's robes before sending him into exile under guard. "I dismantled your chamber. Your torturer confessed. The people of the lower quarter saw the truth." More murmurs, angry now, rising like smoke. "You are nothing without your fear," Lorenzo said, "and the people are no longer afraid." Catalina stepped forward. Her voice was hoarse but clear. "I was born with this mark. I never understood it. But I know this. If it makes me a target, then let me be a beacon instead." She raised her head high. The star caught the light. "I will not burn. I will not run. If they take me again, it will be with open eyes and unbroken spirit." From the crowd, someone shouted, "We stand with her." Others echoed, "Enough blood. No more fire. Let her speak." Torquemada's face darkened. "Disperse them," he ordered. But the soldiers hesitated. Some lowered their weapons, others took a step back. One knelt. "My family served Leon," he said. "I remember the crest." Another followed. "She saved my sister. She healed her with only words and herbs." Torquemada turned to his elite guard. "Kill them all if they do not yield." The guards looked at one another, and no one moved. Then, from the edges of the plaza, a sound. Hoofbeats. Dozens. Riders entered, wearing cloaks of navy and crimson, bearing the old insignia of Leon. Lorenzo's loyalists. Veterans, outcasts, scholars, farmers, all drawn back by the return of a name they had buried. They dismounted and entered the square not with swords raised, but with banners unfurled. The banner of the Lion reborn. Torquemada stepped back. "This is treason." Lorenzo stepped down from the platform. "This is reclamation." For a moment, no one spoke. Then a child approached Catalina, a girl of no more than 10. She touched the mark behind Catalina's ear. "You're not scary," the girl said. Catalina smiled, tears in her eyes. "I'm not." Lorenzo looked to Torquemada. "Leave Valladolid, or stay and answer to the people." Torquemada's jaw trembled. He turned, cloak snapping, and walked toward the cathedral without another word. The crowd parted. No one bowed. No one prayed. He was no longer their shepherd. As the people surged around Lorenzo and Catalina, voices lifted not in fear, but in hope. They had seen something they could no longer deny. The lion had returned, and the star had risen. But Catalina's heart whispered beneath the roar and triumph, if the prophecy is just beginning, what terrible price will its ending demand? The mountains of Valderocha loomed like sleeping giants, jagged and crowned with mist. At their feet, buried beneath rocks and hidden by time, lay the last breath of the old resistance. Few knew the way, and even fewer dared return. But Lorenzo had carried the path in his memory like a wound. They arrived after 3 days of silence and sleepless nights. Catalina rode behind him, her arms clasped loosely around his waist, though the closeness now held less suspicion and more weariness. The winds bit at their cheeks, but neither complained. A narrow gorge opened between slabs of slate. Beyond it, an iron gate sealed with rusted chains barred the way. Lorenzo dismounted and pressed his palm to a stone embedded in the wall. A hidden mechanism clicked. The gate groaned open. Behind it, the world changed. Torches lit the path downward into the bowels of the mountain. The walls wept moisture. The air smelled of oil and stone. They descended in silence, Catalina limping slightly from a reopened wound. At the bottom, a cavern opened wide, glowing with faint blue crystals that shimmered like starlight. A dozen figures emerged, some armed, some cloaked in scholars' robes. One among them stepped forward, his beard white as frost, his eyes brighter than fire. He wore robes of blue and gold faded by time. I thought I'd never see the lion's son again, he said, voice gravelly. Nor are your riddles, old man, Lorenzo replied, embracing him. Catalina watched the exchange, unsure. The old man turned to her. And this must be the flame bearer. Come closer, girl. Let me see the mark. She hesitated, then nodded. She pushed her hair aside. The star pulsed faintly under his gaze. So it is true, he whispered. The prophecy lives. Who are you? Catalina asked. My name is Aldemar. I was the High Lawkeeper of Leon before the Inquisition turned fire into faith. I was exiled with the boy who would not kneel. He gestured for them to follow. The resistance had carved a sanctuary deep underground. Caves had become libraries. Tunnels led to chambers where rebels trained in silence. Stolen relics, old scrolls, remnants of a kingdom lost, all preserved in shadow. Catalina was given a chamber of her own, sparse but clean. She slept for 12 hours straight. When she awoke, Lorenzo was waiting. There's someone I want you to meet, he said. They returned to Aldemar, who sat before a table covered in parchment. Upon it were drawings of the mark behind Catalina's ear, replicated from ancient sources. Your mark is older than the church, Aldemar said. It predates the crown. It is the seal of the threshold. Catalina leaned in. Threshold of what? Of awakening, of ruin, of renewal. Depends who wears it. You mean it could destroy as well as save? Aldemar nodded slowly. All light casts shadow, but the mark doesn't choose arbitrarily. It seeks a vessel strong enough to endure the burden. In you, it saw something. I didn't choose this, she said. Perhaps not, but it chose you. They began her training that afternoon, not with weapons, but with vision. Aldemar taught her to meditate on the mark, to breathe into its presence, to listen rather than fight. At first she heard nothing. Then came the whispers. Not voices, not exactly, but pulses, images, feelings. A woman cloaked in fire walking through ruins, a lion roaring over a battlefield soaked in rain, a crown split in half, floating in darkness. She told no one, not yet. Days passed. In the silence, trust grew between her and Lorenzo, not by declarations, but by the space they gave each other. He brought her bread without speaking. She touched his arm when fear returned. They didn't name it, but it built itself between glances, wordless and slow. One night she found him in the chamber of the old banners. Relics of Leon hung like ghosts, a cracked shield, a tattered standard, a throne carved from cedar and dust. He stood before it, lost in thought. You used to sit there, she said softly. I was 5 when they took it. I don't remember how it felt. He sat on the ground instead, back against the stone wall. She joined him. "You never told me what happened." "Not all of it." He nodded. "My father trusted the wrong man, an advisor named Ruiz. He made pacts with the church, promised loyalty in exchange for protection, but the church wanted more. They said Leon harbored heresy, even within its bloodline. Because of the mark." "No, because of my mother." Catalina's breath caught. She wasn't of royal blood. She was from the eastern wilds, a healer, a dreamer. She carried knowledge the church feared. My father loved her enough to defy tradition, and they punished him for it. Yes, one night the gates burned. My parents were executed. I was smuggled out by Aldemar and a few loyal guards. The throne fell. The name was erased. She touched his hand. "You carry it still." He looked at her. There was no mask now, no guise, just a man broken and rebuilt by fire. "I never told anyone that story," he said. "I'm not just anyone." They sat in silence, but it was not empty. Later they kissed. It was quiet, hesitant, her hand on his cheek, his on her waist. Not hunger, not escape. A moment paused between who they had been and who they were becoming. The next day, Aldemar intensified Catalina's training. She began to channel small flickers of power from the mark. Not fire, but awareness. She could sense intent behind words, see past illusion, read the hidden energy in people's movements. "One day," Aldemar said, "you may see further than any of us, but the more you see, the harder it will be to live blind again." She understood and feared it. Lorenzo trained separately, rebuilding old tactics with rebel captains, scouting missions, maps spread across stone tables. The shadow of war crept closer with every hour. News came by whisper. Torquemada had returned to Madrid. He called for crusade, branded Lorenzo a usurper, declared the mark of Catalina a heresy to be extinguished. The Inquisition was mobilizing, but something else came too. Hope. Small villages stopped paying tithes. Peasants spoke the names of the lion and the flame-bearer. Resistance cells long thought dead resurfaced. The kingdom was shifting. Catalina stood before the old mirror one evening. Her eyes had changed. Not just tired, sharper, older. Was this the woman the mark had chosen, or the one it would consume? Lorenzo entered. "We ride tomorrow," he said. "Where?" "A village called Arguellos. They've been under siege for days. We'll break the blockade and make it our first liberated ground." She nodded. "I'm ready." He stepped closer. The space between them evaporated. "I don't know what this will become," he said. "Neither do I. But I know I would burn the world before watching them touch you again." She didn't answer. She only kissed him. Later that night alone, she touched the mark. It was burning again, but this time it felt like a heartbeat, like something alive. And deep beneath the stone, Aldemar looked to the stars carved in the ceiling and whispered, "It begins." But Catalina had one question left, a question she kept buried like a blade between her ribs. If I am meant to awaken something ancient, what else will awaken with me? Rain fell over Valladolid like a veil of mourning. The city that had once dared to hope now whispered again in fear. Torquemada had returned not as a man, but as a blade. His soldiers wore black instead of crimson, and the fires they lit were not for warmth. They were for message, for retribution. In the square where Catalina once stood condemned, gallows now rose higher than the cathedral spires. Names were shouted before dawn, houses raided before prayer. Those who had cheered for the lion found themselves stripped of voice and home. Sympathizers vanished, merchants disappeared. Children whispered that the flames had grown mouths and fed themselves. Torquemada walked the streets without guards. He didn't need them. Fear followed him like a shadow. In the deepest cell of the Holy Office, Father Velasco, once stripped and humiliated, now stood again beside his master. His scars had deepened, but so had his hatred. "They gather in the caves," he said, "the lion and his witch." Torquemada smiled. "Then we will smoke the mountain until even stone turns to bone." Far beneath that mountain, the resistance sharpened blades and dreams. Catalina stood at the training circle, breath ragged, Hands blistered. She had practiced with sword and staff for days, but it wasn't combat she trained for. It was clarity. The mark had begun to speak to her again, but in riddles, fire within stone, a name that must die, a crown of ash. She didn't understand. Lorenzo approached as she lowered her stance. "You push too hard." "So do you," he smiled faintly. "Come," he said. "There's something I want you to see." He led her to the high chamber, the one Aldemar rarely opened. Inside were relics, maps, fragments of history long thought erased. He uncovered a cloth. Beneath it was a diadem, not golden, not jeweled, forged from blackened silver, simple and heavy, the true crown of Leon. "My father wore this only once," Lorenzo said. "At his coronation. He said it burned his head." "Why show me this?" "Because soon someone must wear it again." She looked at him. "You mean yourself?" "I mean us." He stepped closer, the air between them tightening. "I don't know what name the prophecy will give us, but I know this: I would stand beside you through fire or famine, not because of a mark, but because of the woman who carries it." Her breath caught. He leaned in. Their lips met. Warmth bloomed in her chest. Not the mark, not fear, something wholly human. The kiss was deep, unhurried, the first moment without wait or watch. Then came the explosion. The mountain shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Cries echoed from the corridors. They ran. Flames bloomed in the lower chambers. The iron gate had been breached. Smoke surged like a monster through the carved halls. "The Inquisition!" Aldemar shouted. "They found us!" Screams filled the sanctuary. Men and women scrambled to defend or flee. Books burned, weapons clanged. Lorenzo unsheathed his sword. "We fight through," he said to Catalina. "Stay behind me." But she stepped beside him instead. "We fight together." They made it to the eastern passage, where rebels clashed with armored zealots. The air was thick with ash and oil. Torches fell. Arrows whistled. Catalina spotted Brother Elias, the healer who had taught her to steady her breath, pierced by a spear. He fell without a sound. Marina, the scout who had brought word from Arguellos, was dragged into smoke by unseen hands. They reached the map chamber. Aldemar was already there, coughing, blood on his lips. "You must go," he said. "We won't leave you." "You must," he gasped. "They want the mark. If they take her, it all ends. Take the lower passage. It leads to the old aqueduct." "I'll carry him," Lorenzo said, but Aldemar pushed him away. "My time is done. But yours, Lorenzo, yours has only begun." He turned to Catalina. "You are not the end of the world," he said softly. "You are its hinge. Let it swing open, not closed." She knelt, tears stinging her eyes. "Thank you." He smiled once. Then the ceiling cracked. They ran. The lower passage was narrow and damp. Water rushed along the edges. Behind them, fire chased air, hungry and wild. They reached a crossroad. "We go right," Lorenzo said. "No," Catalina said suddenly. "Left." He paused. "The mark," she explained. "It pulls me." He nodded. They turned left. Then, thunder. The ceiling collapsed between them. Stone and dust split the tunnel in two. "Lorenzo!" she screamed. "Catalina!" She clawed at the rubble. He did the same, but more fell. The sound of shouts grew distant. "Go!" he shouted. "Get out! I'll find you. I won't leave you. You have to." His voice cracked. "If they take you." She pressed her hand to the stone between them. "I will find you," she whispered. And then she ran. The aqueduct led her into the open, into the forest beneath the cliffs. Smoke bled into the night sky. Sparks rained like fireflies. She fell to her knees, sobbing. The mountain burned behind her. And somewhere in the flames, the man she had kissed, the man who had made her believe again, was either fighting to reach her or already gone. She didn't know which fate terrified her more. She rose. Tears blurred her vision. The mark burned not with power, but with grief. The prophecy had never promised peace, only change. As she disappeared into the trees, the voice in her head whispered a single question. "If the fire has only just begun, who else will I lose before it ends?" Darkness came without mercy. Catalina had barely escaped the burning mountain when they found her. Not soldiers of Torquemada, but hunters of something older, cloaked in ash and silence. They moved like ghosts through the trees. She fought them. She screamed, but they did not speak. A cloth was pulled over her head. Cold iron touched her wrists. Then silence. When she awoke, her arms were bound to a pillar of stone and her feet touched snow. The room was circular, carved from a single slab of granite. Runes glowed along the walls, pulsing with an energy that vibrated against her ribs. She was not alone. Figures in dark robes stood around her. Their faces were hidden, but one among them stepped forward. Female, tall. Her voice was layered as if two people spoke at once. "You wear the mark, and yet you are not awakened." Catalina spat. "I am no one's vessel." "You are no longer your own," the woman replied. From the shadows, fire rose, but not fire that burned, fire that shimmered with blue and violet. The figures began to chant. Catalina struggled. The mark on her neck burned like frost. "You were born in blood, you must remember." But Catalina had no memory of this place, no memory of these rites, yet something within her stirred, a flicker of recognition, of fear. The leader extended a blade. It hovered just above Catalina's palm. "We do not wish to harm you. We wish to awaken you." Catalina's voice broke. "What am I?" Catalina's voice broke. "What am I?" Skin. Blood bloomed. At the same moment, far to the south, Lorenzo awoke in agony. He lay on a straw mat inside a peasant's hut. His side was bandaged, soaked with crimson. The face above him was lined and weathered, a farmer's wife with hands like bark and eyes that had seen too many winters. "You shouldn't be alive," she said. "Then why am I?" "Because my sons found you near the river, half dead, talking in your sleep about lions and witches." He tried to sit, but pain lanced through his ribs. "Don't move. You need weeks." "I have days," she scowled. "You nobles never change." "I'm not noble anymore." "Then why do they hunt you like a king?" He didn't answer. For 3 days he remained in the care of the farmstead. At night, he dreamed of fire and stone, of Catalina's voice crying out. He woke with clenched fists and a blade beneath his pillow. On the 4th morning, he rose. The old woman found him packing supplies from her table. "You're still broken," she said. "I don't need to be whole, I need to be dangerous." "Where will you go? You have no men left." "I'll find new ones," she laughed. "And who would follow a crippled ghost?" Lorenzo looked at her, and for the first time his voice carried not hope, but steel. "Those who have nothing left to lose." He left that morning, wounded, alone, determined. By dusk, he reached the ruins of an old monastery. There he lit a fire and waited. Before midnight, they began to come. First 1, then 2, then 5. Old faces, new scars. Men and women who had served his family before the fall. Thieves who had once stolen under his banner. Exiles who still remembered his mother's kindness. Among them came a figure he did not expect. A Moorish warrior named Samir, once a bodyguard of his uncle, thought dead. "You carry the old crown's scent again," Samir said. "I carry vengeance. Then I will carry your sword if you can lift it." And so, from ashes, the lion gathered teeth. Meanwhile, Catalina bled into the runes, but she did not scream. She saw visions, not just of her past, but of something older. A tower of bone rising from a sea of glass. A woman in flames holding a child with her face. A voice whispering in a language she did not know but understood. "You are the seed and the flame." The robed woman stepped closer. "You see it now." Catalina's eyes opened. They glowed. "I see you, and I see the lie." She yanked her arm. The chain cracked. No more cages. The mark blazed, the runes shattered. The chamber shook. Catalina stood unbound. The figures fled. Only the leader remained. "You could have ruled with us." Catalina took a step forward. "Then you never knew me." She turned, and the chamber collapsed behind her. She fled into the wilds. The stars above her spun like blades. Her blood still dripped, but her spine had turned to iron. She didn't know where she was. But she knew where she had to go, back to the fire, back to the lion. Lorenzo marched north with his handful of rebels. He had no banners, no gold, but he had names, names of those who had betrayed, names of those who had helped. And in every village they passed, someone whispered, "He lives, the lion walks." The prophecy was no longer myth, it was marching. Catalina reached a river town by the end of the week. She collapsed outside a temple. A young girl found her and dragged her inside. The priests tended her, though they feared her mark. They asked nothing. She offered nothing. But each night, she wrote her visions in charcoal across the temple wall. A map began to form. She was not running anymore. She was remembering. Lorenzo reached the valley of Moril at dawn. There, an army of mercenaries blocked the passage north, 10 to his 20, but he stood before them with nothing but his sword and a name. "I am Lorenzo de Alvarez," he declared, "last son of Leon, and if you draw your blades against me, you declare war on the prophecy itself." The mercenaries laughed. Then Samir stepped forward and threw a satchel of coins at their feet. "Double what Torquemada pays." They hesitated. Then, one by one, they lowered their weapons. The lion passed. In the temple, Catalina stood before the final wall. Her visions had ended, but her path had not. She stepped into the light and whispered a name she had never spoken aloud. "Mother." The wind answered. She turned north. The world was changing. The fire had not burned her, it had forged her. Lorenzo stood on the cliffs above the capital. His followers now numbered near 100. Farmers, soldiers, heretics, believers. He had no king's crown, but he had the people, and he had her, somewhere out there, waiting. He clenched his fist. "This time we do not reclaim the past," he said. "This time we build what they fear most, hope." And in the darkness a figure watched him, a woman cloaked in stars, not Catalina, but something older, something waiting, something watching, and her voice echoed in the wind. "When the blood pact is sealed, what price will the lion pay for awakening the flame?" Smoke blanketed the valley of San Braulio. Black towers spiraled into the sky like fingers clawing at heaven. What had once been farmland was now scorched earth, dotted with twisted iron and makeshift graves. The Inquisition had passed through days earlier. The silence they left behind spoke louder than any sermon. From the hills above, Lorenzo watched the landscape with clenched fists. His cloak, torn and ash-stained, flapped in the wind. At his back, nearly 300 fighters waited, a growing army of outcasts, soldiers, peasants and scholars, all drawn by whispers of prophecy and vengeance. He dismounted slowly. "Is this what our kingdom has become?" he said to no one in particular. Beside him, Samir adjusted his blade. "It has become what it was always meant to be," he said, "burned hollow so something else may take root." Lorenzo nodded. "Then let the root grow teeth." They had tracked the Inquisition AS patrol to the edge of Arganza, a fortified outpost carved into a cliffside, once a grain store, now a prison for the dissenting and the damned. Intelligence spoke of dozens of prisoners within. Women, children, rebels, priests who refused to kneel. It was not just a stronghold, it was a statement, and they would silence it. But before the storm, fate offered one more turn. As the sky bruised with dusk, a rider galloped up from the southern ridge. Lorenzo's heart stilled. The woman on the horse dismounted before the beast had stopped. Catalina, mud-caked, eyes like thunderclouds, hair tied back in a warrior's braid. The mark behind her ear glowed faintly, pulsing with heat. They stood across from each other in silence for a heartbeat too long. Then he stepped forward. She didn't speak. She threw her arms around him. Their kiss did not ask permission, it demanded. It burned. The camp around them cheered. But Lorenzo heard nothing. Catalina's breath was the only sound that mattered. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I thought you were lost," he whispered. "I was," she answered. "But I found fire on the other side of silence." They spoke that night in his tent, surrounded by maps and blades and letters from villages that had already sworn to his name. She traced the paths with her fingers. She spoke of the runes, the rituals, the visions that had awakened in her. They were more than dreams, they were instructions. "Lorenzo," she said, "the mark doesn't only burn, it remembers. Every time it pulses, I see more. This was never about survival. It's about inheritance, not of power, of memory. I am the last flame of something ancient." "And I am the last lion," he said. She looked at him. "Then let us burn and roar together." Dawn came blood red. They marched. Arganza rose from the earth like a beast's skull, jagged and crude. Walls of granite, a single iron gate, and towers that pierced the clouds. Lorenzo stood before it with his army. He raised his sword high. "Today we take not a fortress, but our breath back. Today we carve space for truth to speak again. Let them fear us not because we fight, but because we remember." A flaming arrow flew overhead. Then steel clashed. The battle was brutal. Archers on the cliffs rained bolts. Men climbed the walls with hooks and ropes. Fire spread across the outer ramparts. Screams mingled with the clang of swords and the wet thud of maces against shields. Catalina moved like lightning. She did not wield a sword. She wielded presence. Wherever she ran, the ground seemed to bend to her path. The mark on her neck glowed brighter with every wound, with every fallen ally. She found herself inside the prison's lower halls, unlocking doors with keys taken from fallen guards. She helped a child with blood on his face to his feet. She tore cloth to wrap a wounded nun's leg. "I will not let you burn," she told them all. On the upper rampart, Lorenzo fought near the main gate. Blood streamed from a gash on his shoulder, but he did not falter. For every soldier he struck down, 2 more followed him. And then he saw it. Torquemada's banner. A detachment from the capital had arrived. Reinforcements. The real war was about to begin. Catalina joined him on the wall. Her face was streaked with soot, her eyes locked on the banner. "They will not stop," she said. "Then neither will we." The soldiers in black marched forward like an iron wave, but Lorenzo turned to his army and shouted, "Let them come, let them hear our roar." And roar they did. The 2 forces clashed in the courtyard of Arganza, blood soaking the stone. In the chaos, Catalina saw visions again. The crown split, the lion bleeding from the eyes, a fire that spoke her name. A voice, "One must fall so the many may rise," she screamed, and the mark on her neck exploded in light. All around her, time seemed to slow. Arrows froze mid-flight. The wind howled in reverse, and in that second between seconds, she saw everything. Lorenzo dying, the people kneeling, the world devouring itself again and again, unless what? She gasped. The vision ended. Time returned. She turned and saw Lorenzo, his back turned, fending off 3 soldiers. A 4th approached from behind, blade raised. "No!" She sprinted. Too late. The blade came down, but Samir intercepted it with his own chest. The warrior fell without a sound. Lorenzo caught him. Blood poured. "No," he whispered, "not you too." Samir smiled faintly. "You said you needed those with nothing to lose. I lost everything already." Then he died. Rage overtook Lorenzo. He stood, blood dripping from his hands, and the tide turned. They drove the Inquisition back. The fortress fell. When silence returned, the dead lay in heaps. The air smelled of blood and ash. Catalina collapsed beside Lorenzo. They didn't speak. They just held each other. The fires were dying, but something darker was rising. Catalina felt it in her bones. The prophecy had spoken of light and war. But now, in the ruin of Arganza, it began to speak of something else. A name, a presence. Older than Torquemada, older than Leon, watching from beyond the veil, waiting for the last flame to burn. And so Catalina asked herself, if this was only the beginning of the war, then what nightmare waits at its end? The skies over Castilla burned with the colors of war. Crimson clouds clung to the horizon, as if reluctant to release the last breath of twilight. Below, on the plains of Santo Domingo, 2 armies stood, the silence between them as loud as prophecy. One banner bore the black cross of the Holy Office. The other, the gold lion of Leon, newly stitched by trembling hands and carried by men who had buried too many brothers. Catalina stood beside Lorenzo atop a ridge overlooking the valley. The wind played with the edges of her cloak. Her eyes were calm, but her fingers trembled. She could feel the pull of the mark, not pain, not warning, but awakening. The old power within her stirred like something long buried remembering its name. Lorenzo watched the Inquisition's lines. "There is no turning back now," he said. Catalina looked at him, the light catching the scar on his cheek. "Then we go forward together." The horns sounded. The final war had begun. The battlefield roared. Steel met steel. Flame met flesh. Arrows rained from the heavens like vengeful stars. Lorenzo charged at the head of his army, sword raised, his cry the echo of a kingdom forgotten. Catalina moved not through ranks, but through meaning. Her presence turned chaos into clarity. She whispered to the wind and it bent. She touched fallen allies and their breath steadied. She was not a weapon. She was a hymn. Then came the darkness. From the center of the Holy Office's formation, a figure emerged on horseback. Torquemada, clad in black armor etched with gold, his face hidden beneath a silver mask shaped like a skull. His voice rang without echo, spoken through lips that had sentenced thousands. "False king," he called to Lorenzo, "and whore of fire. This day ends your heresy." Lorenzo stepped forward. "This day ends your reign." The two men charged. Their swords clashed beneath the blood moon. They fought like prophecy demanded, not for land, not for power, for the right to shape tomorrow. Steel screamed against steel, blades sparked. Lorenzo moved with fury and grace, but Torquemada's strikes were brutal, precise. Every motion was guided not by skill but by centuries of dogma. Catalina watched, the mark behind her ear seared. Her heart told her what would come. Torquemada struck. Lorenzo fell to one knee. Catalina ran. She reached them as Torquemada raised his sword for the killing blow. "Enough," she said. The world stilled. The wind froze. The battlefield paused, as if time itself bowed to her voice. Torquemada turned. "You," he hissed, "the blasphemous flame, the demon's gift." Catalina stepped between him and Lorenzo. "I am not a gift. I am not a curse. I am the mirror of what you fear." She placed her palm on Torquemada's chest. The mark blazed. Visions flooded his eyes. He saw every woman he burned, every man he silenced, every child he condemned for dreaming. He screamed, but it was not pain. It was truth. When Catalina lifted her hand, Torquemada crumbled, not in blood, but in soul. He dropped his sword. He fell to his knees. And then, like dust meeting dawn, he vanished. No one moved. The war had ended in silence. Lorenzo rose slowly. Catalina turned to him, her eyes wet, her body shaking. "It's done," she said. He took her hands. "Then let us begin." The days that followed were stitched with both song and sorrow. The dead were buried in fields of olive trees, the wounded healed in churches where bells no longer tolled for burning. The people of Castilla gathered in the great plaza of Valladolid, not to crown a king but to witness a rebirth. Lorenzo stood before them in robes of red and silver, but he did not take the throne alone. Beside him stood Catalina, her mark uncovered, her presence radiant. "I do not rule," she said. "I remember. I guide. I carry the old flame so that new light may grow." And the people listened. Lorenzo held the crown in his hands, the one forged for war, now reforged for peace. "I accept this crown," he declared, "but I will never wear it alone." He placed it on his head, then reached for Catalina's hand. Together they stepped forward, and the crowd knelt not in worship but in hope. That night, as the stars danced like torches above the city, Lorenzo and Catalina stood on the balcony of the old palace. "You once asked me what I dreamed," he said, "and you said you dreamed of fire." He smiled. "I dream of it still, but now I dream of the fire that warms, the fire that leads home." She touched his cheek. "And I dream of the lion that doesn't just fight, but forgives." He leaned in. Their kiss was soft, infinite. Below them the world turned. The kingdom would need rebuilding. The darkness would rise again. But the lion had returned, and the flame had chosen. And far beyond the borders of Castilla, across oceans and silence, something watched. something that had waited longer than empires. It stirred now, whispering a question, a warning, a promise. If peace has come at last, then what nightmare will awaken when the next flame is stolen? Years passed. The throne room of Leon no longer smelled of ash. Its walls, once cracked and crumbling, now held tapestries woven with stars and lions, not swords. Children laughed through the corridors. Bells rang not for fear, but for planting, harvest, and celebration. Catalina walked alone through the garden once sown by her mother's hands. Vines climbed the arches. The air smelled of rosemary and memory. In her palm, the mark still pulsed, quieter now, not in warning, but in rhythm with the earth. Lorenzo watched her from the steps of the tower. Older, perhaps, but stronger in the places no crown could touch. Their reign had no name in history, only in stories. And those stories had begun to spread beyond mountains, beyond borders, even beyond oceans, carried by the wind, told around fires, written in songs. Some say the flame will return, others say it never left, but all agree on one thing: the lion did not rise to rule. He rose so others would remember how. If this tale stirred your heart, ignited your imagination, or whispered something ancient to your soul, then this is just the beginning. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the stories yet to unfold. Click the like button to honor the flame that guided Catalina and the roar that awakened Lorenzo. Share this saga with someone who still believes in destiny, and save it, for there will be nights when you will want to return to these echoes of fire and prophecy. Every action keeps the flame alive, and one day, when the next story begins, you'll be among the first to hear it.